Welcome, family, to what we call Neighbor to Neighbor, which is a conversation about this issue of COVID-19. We've been talking about this pandemic that has been all over our community and that has caused a lot of death and devastation. But within this pandemic, there also is hope. And so tonight, we are glad to be partnered with a number of organizations and community voices and leaders to have what we believe is a very powerful and a very hopeful conversation. And the real issue is how do we ensure that the people that we love and those that we care so deeply for are going to still be around here? We have a vaccine that we know works. I will tell you without equivocation, I made the decision because I have an 80-year-old mother who I love and dearly, and I want to see. And I wanted to make sure that I was not the cause of her suffering and hurt or harm while I just went to visit with her. But it's not about me, it's about you. This is a conversation tonight. And so I want to introduce you to this wonderful group of panelists that's going to be joining us for this discussion. But before we get to that, Gail, are you on with us?
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
How are you? Gail, introduce yourself, and you're going to be co-moderating this. I like to call it really a fireside chat, really, because it gives us about an hour and 30 minutes to tell our story, to tell why we are passionate about this. And you have a very compelling story. Introduce yourself to the audience.
My pleasure. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Gail Brooks, and I am the principal strategist of the Black Cross, and we are a whole health equity consultancy that is dedicated to the accelerated closure of the health equity gap in at-risk communities of color. And so one of our initial projects was started last year on the heels of the pandemic as a result of my experience with COVID-19. So I have a background in research and planning for communications, and I was kind of taking a little bit of break, figuring out what was next. And, you know, the creator has a way of figuring it out for you and putting you in that position to receive the call, which is exactly what I feel I have done. So I partnered with Fulton County, blessed and grateful and honored to have done so, to develop a campaign called Alive and in Color. And we bring people together from the community with experts, medical experts, scientists, in conversation to talk about the facts. And also, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Bozeman, the stories, because what we do know is that the stories are compelling, particularly in instances like these, where we need to kind of make things real for people.
All right, and we're going to share more of your story because it is a very powerful testimony. Let's introduce the rest of our panelists, and then if we got any special guests joining us on this broadcast, we want to introduce them. Erica Broadwater. Let me make sure I get it right. Erica Broadwater. Erica from the West View Community Organization. Erica, how are you?
I'm doing well, Derek. Hello, everyone. And I'm so thankful to be here and to have this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your organization.
Okay, so I'm a executive board member of the Westview Community Organization of the historic Westview community here in Atlanta. And we basically work together to advocate for the community, make sure that everyone is informed and aware of what's going on. And this is my first year serving as the scribe, and it has been a marvelous journey thus far. So I look forward to continue to serve in that capacity.
Truly grassroots.
Yes.
We're also joined by Dr. Kathy Earls, a physician. Dr. Earls, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us about you and the practice and the organization that you work with.
Okay, I am a pediatrician and obesity certified specialist as well. And I'm really here, not so much based on my organization of Novo Nordisk, although that is indeed who I work for. It's really because I have a passion and care and concern for our community and believe that we can do better currently than we're doing.
All right. We're also joined by Jamal Grooms. He's the Greater Atlanta Chapter President of the Pan-Hellenic Council. Brother Grooms, how are you?
I'm fantastic, and greetings. Good to see you.
Okay, first of all, Brother Grooms, you are way too sharp. All right. Sharper than me. I feel underdressed. But good to see you, man. Tell us about the Greater Atlanta chapter of the Pan Atlantic Council. Why is this such an important conversation for you all to be engaged in as well?
Well, the short answer is it is our fiduciary duty to serve the community. And the greatest thing about being a part of the Panhel is we bring all of the Divine Nine groups together and function under one umbrella. And that way we can reach a lot of organizations, or a lot of people, I should say, in one small swoop. It's the coolest thing. And I can say, when I pledged at Dillard University years ago, I never had an opportunity to work together. We were too busy competing with one another, but it's really nice to function under the banner of unity. So I'm excited.
Great. Dr. Herman Skip Mason is joining us as well. Dr. Mason, or Skip, as we affectionately call him. Are you on with us?
I'm here, Dr. Bozeman. Good to be here. I'm here. I was invited by Fran Calhoun. I was about to say, no, Wednesday night is Bible study night in the colored church. You don't schedule something around 7 when folks trying to study the Bible. But then I saw that Derek Bozeman and Jabal Groom. So I said, well, the Lord will forgive me tonight for canceling Bible study. I'm here tonight because this is a conversation, Derek, you know, that we have to have, and particularly in the church. And so I'm honored to share in this conversation in hopes that we'll get folks who have not been vaccinated to understand why they need to be.
And that's a great segue into our first kind of conversation. Each one of these has a vignette, a kind of theme to it. The importance of community immunity. Dr. Mason, I mean, you kind of hit it. We'll start with you. Talk about why it's important. This message that needs to go forward from every pulpit, from every place where God's name, regardless of how we identify him or her, is remembered. What is the message to those in the pews, from those in the pulpit, that you think can reach them or resonate with them? And what has been the response from your own church?
So, you know, like most churches, we shut down last March. And we entered into uncharted territories as it related to worshiping virtually and using technology. We did not have a lot of information about this COVID-19, but we knew that it was dangerous. We knew that we needed to follow our common sense. And this is the drawing line, because Christians and people who go to church are very interesting people. You know, the Bible talks about faith without works, okay? You know, and so preachers, you know, had the wide variety of preaching, trying to provide some understanding and explanation. Folks preached about the plagues that were brought on and other subjects. So when we got understanding and we got information, we could make some informed choices. And when the vaccine was created, it was a no-brainer for me. And it was a no-brainer for members of my congregation. Why? Because I want to live, okay? And if the vaccine is going to protect me and to protect my mother, like your mother in her 80s, who was going through cancer treatment, and the doctors told her, you need to get the vaccine. And she looked at me. I said, Mama, if the doctor said you need to be vaccinated while you're going through treatment, you need to be vaccinated. I wanted my children to live. And so we got them vaccinated, 19 and 18. So it's really about common sense. Yes, it's about, it has tested our faith, Derek, but it is also about just using some common sense. We don't know what kind of vaccines were put in us when we went to school. I'm a product of the Atlanta public school system like you are. I know Jamal is, you know, and you had to get vaccinated. You had to get the mumps, measles, and rubella shot. We don't know what they put up in our arms and in our systems, okay? The polio shot, we had to get those vaccines. So for me, it was just common sense. And so my members have done well. I would probably say that we are 98% vaccinated at the West Mitchell Street CME Church. And for that small 2%, they know that they are not welcome back until they think and pray and make it possible for everybody to be safe, in the congregation.
Dr. Kathy Earls, 98% vaccination rate. As a physician, that has to make you
Yes.
excited knowing what we're dealing with in terms of this pandemic.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
the message to those who are unvaccinated now? What do we need to be saying to them? As part of what Skip did was cast it in your Christian responsibility to be a part of this sacred whole. But you got to be excited when you hear 98% vaccination rate inside of a church. Certainly, we need to ask Skip what he did to make sure we achieving those numbers. How is that consistent with what we see in other parts of the community?
Absolutely. Let me first say, Brother Bozeman, that I think that Brother Mason did in fact bring a Bible study to us by his message that he just spoke to us. Let me say that. So we're not missing out on Bible study. Thank you there, Brother Mason. But what it says, 98% is just remarkable. If we had 98% vaccination rate, if we had 90% vaccination rate, if we had even 80%, 85% vaccination rate, we would not be in this current situation, because what we would have done would have been created what is essentially known as herd immunity, which can happen either two ways. It can happen by the majority of the individuals actually becoming immune to the disease by getting vaccinated or by getting ill. Okay, we can't afford to get ill. This is not a cold. Many of us do not survive. So in order for those who particularly cannot get the vaccine, like an infant, like those that are coming through certain treatments. And thankfully, that was not the case with Brother Mason's mom, but there are some who go through a disease process and because of the medication that they're on, they cannot get vaccinated. So it's up for us to protect these vulnerable individuals. We cannot do that if we do not increase the percentage of us, of everyone for that matter, that become vaccinated quickly as well.
Yeah. Gail, you've been studying this. You've been looking at this as a COVID survivor. Tell us your story, because I think it's really compelling. And then I want you to talk a little bit about the numbers here in Fulton County and in Georgia in general. What are we looking at in terms of, I think we're hovering at about a 48% vaccination rate, which is one of the lowest in the nation. What are we missing? Tell the story of the tale of the tape on this COVID vaccination need. Why community partners, community voices like the ones that we heard already are so important in this fight.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things. I'll start with kind of my experience with COVID-19 and why I personally believe that getting vaccinated is so important. I contracted COVID early in March when we didn't even really have tests. And what I came to find out really quickly was that information and access was not available to those who needed it most, right? So the communities that suffered or got hit hardest, both economically as well as with COVID in terms of hospitalization, serious illness, death, those were the same communities who were not getting that information. So for me, it has become increasingly important because I'm a long hauler. So now I am blessed in the sense that I am not on a machine. I don't need oxygen. I didn't really have any damage to my lungs, but I do have neurological symptoms and other symptoms that I have to manage. And so it's quite frustrating when you feel like you've been called to deliver upon a mission, and you now have to figure out how to get more done in a certain amount of time because you sundown at a certain time in the evening. Your vision literally gets blurry and you can't read papers when you wake up at a certain time or when you go to bed at a certain time. So I am just super passionate about educating people on the possibilities of contracting COVID, right? So death is obviously, the worst issue or the worst outcome, but there's so much in between that we want to avoid. And when we think about our communities now, we're still super vulnerable because we have the lowest vaccination rates. So for example, in Fulton County alone, there are roughly between 30 and 40 census tracts that have, I believe, less than a 20% vaccination rate, 20-30% vaccination rate. My zip code, 30310 on the Southwest Atlanta, the West Side, neighborhoods on the West Side, Summerhill, Asheville, Vine City. These are all neighborhoods that we know are quite vulnerable socially, economically. And then when you put COVID on top of that, it's disaster, right? So we've really got to work hard to close the gap. There's roughly a gap of 90,000 people between non-Hispanic white residents of Fulton County who are vaccinated and African-American residents of Fulton County who are vaccinated, despite the fact that we have almost equal population sizes.
You talked about long haulers. Explain to those who will be viewing and those who are viewing, what exactly is that? Because we use the term, and a lot of us may not know what that means, but you describe very well the symptoms you're experiencing. Tell us a little bit about long haulers and what that means in the life of a person who has been COVID positive.
Yeah, so, recovery time, well, let me back up and just say that one of the really challenging, and I'm not the expert here, Dr. Earls is certainly more qualified to speak on some of these things than I am, but one of the more challenging issues about treating this virus is the breadth of presentation, as they call it, right? So in other words, it can show up in your body so many different ways. And so symptoms is one of the areas in which there's so much variety in terms of, what happens to you when you get sick. So long haul symptoms are those that tend to last beyond the average window, right? Of maybe, I want to say it's a month and a half to 3 months, maybe, which is kind of the average time span. I think that people are maybe down with illness. So from 3 weeks upwards to 3 months, right? Then beyond that period of time, let's say a year and a half now for me, people are still experiencing symptoms of various degrees and of various aspects of how their body functions. So gastrointestinal issues, vision, as I mentioned, clarity, the mind fog is a real issue for a lot of people that I know. The breathing, people are still, on assisted breathing after being out of the hospital for months and months or a year later. So we're really, the impact is huge. And I don't even think we have conceived of the impact when we start to think about the care that these people are going to need on an ongoing basis. And now when you think about populations that already over-index in various diseases, I mean, African Americans, we over-index in just about everything out there. So when you put that into the mix, I think then maybe it starts to become real that we have a community that's facing a real potential crisis. So we need to get people mobilized and motivated to get everyone vaccinated and protected.
Dr. Earls, let's jump back to you before we go to Erica and to Jamal. Talk about the symptomology. Talk about how we know we're now dealing with a couple of different variants. We're going to talk about the Delta variant a little bit. The Lambda variant that has popped up. Talk about how does one know or how do they have some clue that they are COVID positive, they've contracted SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 virus? What are they going to experience? So if there are those who are watching this broadcast and say, look, I just been feeling lethargic, I've been feeling tired, when should they know that they need to get checked? And when is it the danger zone for people? In terms of COVID-19.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that question. The one thing that's interesting about that to me is that many are asymptomatic. So asymptomatic meaning that they have no signs or symptoms whatsoever, and therefore are I would like to think some of the more concerning because they then do not seek quarantine, do not seek a test, but what they do is pass it on to others that are also vulnerable for the disease. So that's one thing. So if an individual has symptoms, oftentimes the symptoms can range from thinking that you have a cold or a runny nose, coughs or throat trouble. Breathing is a big thing that doesn't seem to express itself over a very long period of time. I mean, from what I understand, and Ms. Brooks, you know, you correct me on this, but I think it comes in rather acutely, is such that it gets bad really quickly. And then the other thing that we're talking about, Ms. Brooks talked about the long hauler symptoms, is that what we're seeing is that there's no rhyme or reason as to why some people develop long hauler syndrome and why some don't. We used to think it was the sicker of those that have COVID that do, but now we know that we really can't tell. There are oftentimes younger individuals and oftentimes individuals who had just mild symptoms who develop these long hauler symptoms. So it's not like you get it and your symptoms may be mild and all is well and right, and you may not feel anything aside from the fact that I'm sure you've infected other individuals. This could go on for a longer period of time than just that period of acute symptoms that you have.
Let's go to Erica Broadwater. Erica, you are at the grassroots. Talk about how COVID-19 has impacted. You know, we didn't have to second guess whether we're gonna have a West Side community organization meeting, who was gonna bring the tea or who was gonna bring the punch, or whether we needed serving gloves, or what we were gonna do as an organization. Talk about how COVID-19 has impacted your ability to kind of come together as just communal people and do community planning. How has this impacted you within your organization?
Yes, Derek, thank you for the question. So COVID has definitely impacted the way that we engage each other. Of course, we have not been able to meet face to face. So we do hold our WCO meetings virtually. But even with that, we're still working to get things done. We actually have a committee, Westview Votes, and we're getting ready to get out and pass out information. So we're doing things so we can be outside, spaced out, but still reach out to the community. So it may have put a speed bump in our plan, but it has not stopped us from doing the work that needs to be done.
Now, talk about you personally. Do you still go out? Do you still meet? And what do you say to people about the need for them to be vaccinated? Because I'm a community leader, has chaired the NPU. Of course, I've been on the city council, been elected. And I feel the need, the urge to want to be in the presence of people, but I also want to be safe. And so what is your message to your community organization and others who may not be vaccinated?
Okay, so my message to them, and to answer your question, yes, I do go out. My family and I have 3 young children, one of whom was able to get vaccinated, so which is great, but we still go out. But what I want the community to know is that it's not just about you and what you want to do. You have to make a larger sacrifice. You have to think about everyone else as well. We're all connected, whether it's directly or indirectly. So we have a personal responsibility to look out not just for ourselves, but for those around us as well. So that's my message. Get out there, get the information, read it, talk to people who have been vaccinated that you know they can share their experiences with you to really help you make a final decision on what you want to do.
I want to acknowledge the president. We've been joined also by Atlanta City Councilman Michael Julian Bond. So we welcome him to this broadcast to tell you how important he is. Mike and I served together on city council. So it's good to see our city leaders jumping in and being a part of and leaning into this issue as well. Brother Jamal Grooms, you have a yeoman's job as the Greater Atlanta Chapter President of the Pan-Hellenic Council. Hundreds of thousands of young people and tens of thousands here in the Atlanta area are going to be going back to school. Many of them or in Greek letter organizations that the Pan-Atlantic Council has some governing authority over, and to promote social, participation. But you also have the group at that age that has been the most stubborn and the hardest to cut through, to talk to about this vaccine, while it is so critical and important. What is your battle strategy? What is your ground game going to look like? What do we need to do to get the message to the undergraduate chapters that they too have a responsibility to help stop the spread of COVID-19?
Great question. And the battle strategy is very simple. We tried to dumb it down to drive awareness and dispel myths, ensure people have access, and then drive acceptance. So our goal is simple in that we target each one of our specific groups, our affinity groups, our tribes, and we are asking each one of the Divine Nine to link up with their undergraduate chapters and pull them into all of the strategies that we are employing in the way of town halls. We are actually working on doing a forum with some of the local AU Center organizations. We're working on that currently. And then just pulling them into understanding the why behind why it's critical. I mean, if you look at the numbers, as Ms. Brooks was speaking to, we are being adversely affected. And, when you think about how that impact changes the family trajectory, it's critical for us that we really get involved and that we really engage. So we're targeting our local groups and we're bringing them the message, and we're challenging them to bring the message to their local students.
It's been proven that young people receive it better when it comes from other young people. Will there be a vaccination challenge to see, when the chapter president, I'm an Alpha, and we're fortunate to be joined by a former general president of Alpha Phi fraternity, Dr. Herman Skip Mason. But I know when it came to Alpha Rho, even as a member of Ada Lambda chapter, those young brothers wanted to hear from some, they appreciate our wisdom, but they wanted to hear from other young people their ages. How do we get that message? How do we make sure the leadership understand that they are, some of these chapter presidents, they are integral to us really getting this message to their peers?
So that's where the mentoring piece works, right? So I tend to take these young people to lunch or dinner, and maybe I'm swaying them by feeding them a good lunch or dinner. But that is the building block for the relationship. Because if you can build a relationship, then you can articulate what really is critical, and then you can give them the talking points and let them take that information to their peers. But I think the critical mass is building the relationship first, so that you're not talking at them or talking down to them, but you're building a relationship so that you're talking with them, and you're also hearing back from them the needs that they have, so you can support their needs to help them, accomplish the goal that's at hand.
All right. Skip, again, kind of spiritual on the spiritual note. And, you're a historian by training and by trade and profession, and a preacher. There's always been reasonable doubt. We have always, as Black people, had this kind of relationship with the government. We mistrust.
Sure.
They tried to take us out in the Tuskegee experiment. We don't trust the government. I don't trust them to. Why are they trying to all of a sudden help us? They didn't cure all of these other diseases, but they came up with this one so fast. Reasonable doubt. What do you say to those who are naysayers? Both you and I know, I think early in this pandemic, Mike Morrell, a mutual friend of ours, died. That's when it came real, because Mike Morrell had been my caterer to handle all my big Christmas parties and all the things I did. I knew that this thing was real because I talked to him weeks before. he entered the hospital and was on a ventilator for a whole month, and then he died from this virus. What do we say to people who say, I just have doubt, I don't trust it?
Well, I think, dear, we have to acknowledge that their doubt is real. Okay. I don't discount uh, folks who genuinely just don't trust the government. We have a lot of evidence going back to July 4th, 1776, when they put this line, "We hold these truths evident that all men are created equal." We know that was not the case. And so there have been examples after examples of instances where we have doubted our government as it relates to the support of African Americans, especially. And so I think that what we have to do is to build a level of trust and confidence, and information, because so many people who use the Tuskegee experiment a statement are really just misinformed. They don't have all of the facts. Yes, that was a very heinous event that occurred with some Black men in Tuskegee, but it's totally different than this coronavirus, this COVID-19. So we got to continue to teach the faith-based community, which you are very much a part of, though you have not been licensed yet, but you are very much a preacher and pastor in your own right. The faith-based community has tremendous influence and power over the congregations that they serve to inform. And so using, as many of them have used, opportunities for information, opportunities for conversation to talk about why do you not trust this? What is it? And then helping them to see we need the same fervent energy. Let me say this, as we had with the 2020 election. Okay. We need that same fervor. People need to be able to see this is as crucial as this upcoming election that we have. And so we need to continue to inform, to educate. I got tickled with Jamal. All you have to do is to tell these Greek letter organizations, particularly these college chapters, that you cannot have membership intake unless everybody is 100% vaccinated. And I promise you, they will be in droves lining up. You got to speak their language and talk, their talk with it. But I'm encouraged with opportunities like Alive in Color. I'm encouraged with what Fulton County is doing and other entities are doing to continue to spread the message. And we must continue to do just that. And preachers and pastors must use their pulpit not only to preach the gospel, but to preach common sense as well.
Have you had to preach any funerals, or have you had to not go visit people who were sick? I mean, the dreaded nature of this virus that I know for Pastor, because I have a lot of you all as friends, was that I remember talking to Reverend Timothy McDonald, and he almost broke down to say, I had members dying at various hospitals that I could not go see.
Yeah.
I had people who actually died that I could not go see, nor could their family see them. And in the early days of the virus, nobody wanted to go to the funeral. Funeral homes were not quick to bury you.
Right.
Had that impacted your ministry, your church?
Well, we've been very blessed. We've had a couple of members who did get COVID. Thankfully, they lived, they survived. In fact, to be quite honest with you, I am certain that I had COVID before it was called COVID. I went through a 2-month bout in about November, December, before it hit. All the symptoms, I could barely walk. They said I had bronchitis. And so they prescribed me what they thought and what they knew. And I knew what a horrible situation I was in. But yeah, it's been hard to deal with the loss, the tragedy of people who have died. And there, let me say this too, very quickly. One of the most difficult pieces is not being able to visit members, not being able to go to the hospitals. to visit people. I had a former member who died of symptoms of COVID-19 and was on a respirator, but he was still able to text. And so thankfully, I was able to communicate and text with him. It's been tough in the field of nurturing and in the field of service. And so I pray that we lose no one else because, and you know, I did a survey on my Facebook page and Gail reminded me of that. And about 2,500 people responded. And I would say a large percentage of them, most of them had taken the vaccination, but I'm still astonished at the comments of those who did not. They just don't trust it, you know, or they believe that the Lord will take care of me, you know. So they've gone from the spiritual realm to not trusting the science. So we still have our work cut out for us.
Let's go to Gail. I'll share the story as well. I am very up on my health, and having been a diabetic for more than 20 years, I'm always looking at every little thing. And I had gone to my physician 5 times and got the PCR, which is the deep nose swab test, which is really considered the gold standard. In the 5th time, he said, Bozeman, you do not, all negative. I'm not going to keep giving you these every month. You don't need them. Reserve these for folks who need them. I said, no, but I'm just that paranoid. I want to make sure that I'm not going around people. I don't want to be a carrier or a shedder. And he said, well, I have when the last time I went, he said, I have a new lab we're working with that will give you the antibody test, the antigen test. I said, look, it's a new brother that opened a lab. I said, put me through every protocol that you got. Okay, let him, he work in his lab, let him take me through the lab. And when he came back, I went the first time, he said, you are antibody positive. I said, how is that possible? I've not been sick. I've not had any symptoms. I have not had any issues here. And that was in early, this is just a few months after COVID-19 is really now hitting as a pandemic, April, May. And so, but when he came back, I said, well, I know his brother doing the test, so let's just try it again in case his lab is not, his lab is not working. So we went back, did it again. He said, yes, you still have the antibodies present. He said, at some point you were exposed and you could be even asymptomatic then, and you had no sickness from this. And so you're antibody positive. I said, well, maybe antibody positive, but I'm going to also take the vaccine. Before we go back to Earl, I'll go back to Gail. Dr. Earls, is my story familiar? Because I was told, and the antibody test said that I had been exposed. And so at some point, as my doctor said, you have immunity, some level of immunity from the exposure. And so if we're trying to get to herd immunity, you would be in that category of people who have gotten over this virus with no impact to your physical health. That's discernible. And I've had every check that you can get. Talk about that a little bit. How does that happen? And should people take the antibody test too at this point?
A couple things there. So you were essentially asymptomatic.
Yes.
And you were asymptomatic, which is interesting because you would qualify for a group of individuals who has one of the comorbidities such that you should have become sicker. You said that you're a diabetic, but not only did you become sick to the point where you needed hospitalization or anything more than that, you were essentially asymptomatic. So if you were asymptomatic, and you really shouldn't have been based upon the research, just imagine all the other individuals who as well have been asymptomatic. And in reference to the immunity, so you had antibodies at the point in which you were tested. The question is, we don't know how long an individual who's been infected with the COVID-19 virus, how long their immunity remains. So you might have been immune then, but you might get tested today and not be immune anymore, because we don't know how long those natural antibodies that occur when you have the infection last. So that's why it's important. You can get the antibody test if you like, but you still need to be vaccinated. That's my point, because we don't know how long that will last, your immunity.
And certainly I got the vaccination shortly thereafter. And so I wasn't relying on that. As soon as it became available, I went and got it. Gail, let's go to you. You know, unfurling this banner of truth in making people understand, you know, we know the Tuskegee experiment existed. How do we push back this veil of doubt off of the eyes? Obviously, you're a survivor and you're still dealing with this. And what do you say to those? Run the history for us. You researched this, you looked at it very well. Give us a history of why this vaccination is safe and the reason why we should be getting vaccinated.
There we go. Yes. So reason why we should get vaccinated, very simply put, is 99.9% of the deaths related to COVID have been in unvaccinated individuals. Okay. So I think you're still on mute, but I'll keep going. So what we do know that you know, people are dying. The people who are dying are not vaccinated. People are getting sick. There are breakthrough cases, but they're recovering, right? If they have been vaccinated. And we do know that the current vaccines that were developed initially are upwards of 80% effective in preventing serious illness, you know, from COVID-19, even the Delta variant. And that's really important because that is what's causing a lot of the spike, the summer surge as we're calling it. In fact, the CDC estimates that 78% of the cases in Georgia are the Delta variant. This is the same Delta variant that is suspected to be rendering the antibody treatments less effective. It's the same Delta variant that's putting more children in the hospital, more teens in the hospital. And it's the same Delta variant that is more transmissible than the common cold, right? So when you think about how many times your kid or your child gets a cold each season, right? And then think about all of these children who are returning back to school, right? Who are most likely to be asymptomatic carriers. You know, when we think about that, we're really in a precarious position. So we've got to really, you know, educate people and get them to understand the level of risk. Now, you also asked about why they should overcome their fears, right? Related to all of the history of medical abuse, experimentation, and it's a sordid history. We have actually cataloged a lot of that on our site, Alive and in Color, because we need to acknowledge that, right? As you said. But there have been safeguards that have been put in place. And I think we have a list of some of those safeguards that we can throw up really quickly onto the screen for people who want to know. Dr. Earls is, I'm sure, a lot closer to those safeguards than I am. But that's a timeline of some of the key things that have been implemented that have now become standard practices. So things like informed consent. So with the Tuskegee study, they didn't know that they were even, you know, participating in this study, right? They thought they were getting free treatment. Well, you now have to be informed of that. Another thing that we know is that there's a lot of oversight that happens that did not, independent oversight, right? And so for the COVID-19 vaccine, the development of that actually enjoyed unprecedented oversight and from very well-respected and trusted African-American doctors and scientists. You know, not beyond Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who was, you know, at the helm of the Moderna vaccine. Beyond, there's another African-American doctor who was at the helm of the Pfizer vaccine. But we know the former president of Meharry Medical College was on that advisory board, who was looking at all of the data as it was coming out of the clinical trials. They also need to know that we've had unprecedented representation in those trials. We have more Black people participating in the COVID-19 trials than we typically have. in pharmaceutical development. And we have representation of comorbidities. And that's important because we know that that's driving a lot of the concern. People are saying, well, you know, I have lupus. Can I get the vaccine? You know, I have sickle cell. Can I get the vaccine? I'm concerned that they have no clue whether it works in that body. And so people need to know that those comorbidities, those medical conditions that make you immunocompromised were also represented in those clinical trials.
I think that would go. Let's go back to Erica. You're as a community worker, organizer, but the most important role you probably have is as mother. You talked about having your one child vaccinated and the other two maybe are not of age where they can, I'm assuming. You know, it's school time. A lot of decisions are being made whether to send the young people back in or not. Talk about what went into your decision, or to go virtual. Many of you all have had to become subject matter expert in long math and everything else because many have opted to keep the children at home. Talk about the drivers of your decision around whether to send your child or not send them into the school environment, if that's a issue for you all, or what are you hearing in the community regarding that?
All right, well, both my husband and I are educators. Like I said, I'm a teacher. He's an assistant principal. So we definitely had to send our children back to school. And you are correct, my younger two, one is 10, one is 8. They cannot be vaccinated at this time, but my 12-year-old, she is, and she will be fully vaccinated next Monday, complete. So, their school is requiring masks. You know, we constantly have conversation with them. So in the community, what I'm hearing, I hear both sides. Some parents, you know, they don't want the mask. Some do. Some are choosing to keep their children at home. Others are a lot of parents are sending their children back to school. They don't have a choice, you know, because they work and things like that. So that's where we are. And again, like I said, I'm just continuing to encourage everyone, if you're able to, if your child is old enough, get them vaccinated. I had concerns as a mom. You know, I was reading about the research and how everything was going. And honestly, I prayed about it. And my husband and I talked about it, and we decided it's going to be more beneficial if she takes it, and we want to have her as protected as possible. So that's what we did.
How did you sit down and explain it to her, what she was about to experience? And what, did she have any questions for you?
She did not have any questions. She took the information in. You know, we explained to her, this is being done. I know you don't like taking vaccines, but this is being done to protect you. You know, the mask protects you, but it's a combination of these things, right? The mask, the hand washing, the social distancing, and the vaccine. So she understood that. And, you know, we explained possible side effects she may have. She did not experience any at all. So that was great, but she went in, you know, knowledgeable, and she understood, and she was comfortable. I think that's important, not pumping fear into them or making them feel nervous about it. She knew her dad and I had been vaccinated as well, so she was good to go. Very positive response.
Jamal, you deal with that invincible group that say, hey, look it, we don't get sick. We, you know, we you know how we say, we like baby's kids. We don't die, we multiply. We're invincible. We are that group that this is not going to touch, but we are now finding, we're going to talk to Dr. Earls in just a moment, that they are in fact able to contract this Delta variant, and they're able to contract this virus. How do we drive it home? I keep coming back to how do we drive it home, because this is just the toughest nut. Skip said, look, you tell them we're not going to be able to have an initiation, that might drive it. In your initial conversations with young people, we know they're returning to campus now. What are the touch points for them? What do they need to hear from us, you believe, to make them understand that A, you can, in fact, as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old college student, you can, in fact, contract this virus. And in fact, there have been those who've gotten very sick from it.
So again, candid conversations, honest testimonials. You spoke to something, Skip spoke to something, you spoke to something, and it triggered a thought. So the last week of February in 2020, I was sick with something that I thought was a cold. I was having chills and fever, and I lost my taste. And that Sunday, which was March 1st, my wife said, "You're sick and you're acting like you're not sick, but you're going to the hospital." And I went to the hospital and I had a nice 5-day stay at Piedmont Hospital. And I haven't been in a hospital since I was 6. And my testimonials are real with them. Now, by the way, if you track back to that time, there was no such thing as a COVID test, March 1st through 5th of 2020.
Right.
They diagnosed me with double pneumonia, but I share with you what my symptoms were. I did later get an antibody test, as you did. It was positive. I got one. I received one about 6 or 7 months later, and it was still positive. So my message is a sincere message. It's an honest message about this is real. We have one tool in the toolbox. It's a vaccine. The virus is real. It's killing people. I was sick. Several people that I know were sick. Several people that I know are dead. Listen, this is real. And the message is very simple. And I believe, I said it to you on the radio station yesterday. It was W.E.B. Du Bois that said, each one teach one, the educated must teach the uneducated. I believe the vaccinated must reach the unvaccinated. I think it's critical for us to make our story known often and everywhere, simply. And when I talk to young people, I have that conversation. I asked my daughter, who just graduated from Howard, May 8th, what's the pushback? And she said, and Kathy smiled, her son graduated with my daughter. Everybody's excited.
I'm also a Howard graduate though, as well. I just
you are a Howard grad. I do know. Kathy graduated with my sister. But the thing is, we really have to have these candid conversations. We have to build the relationships. I think that is critical. I think that we have to be willing to be patient enough to listen to the young people, to hear what their pushback, what their reservation is. And a lot of times people think, it's funny, even if you ask people that mention the Tuskegee experiment and you ask them 3 questions about the experiment, they know nothing. So I think we have to be the purveyors. We have to be the ones to share the information. We have to be the drivers to drive this message home. And I think this is a great forum to aid in that process. I think that we have to continuously come up with ideas and be creative. I think that we ask our young people, how would they like for us to support them in driving home this message? And then I think we simply execute. And execution is critical. If we do nothing else, we have to execute.
Skip.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're the man on this conversation, right? And we can be stubborn as hell.
Absolutely.
We will not go to the doctor. The growth can be 5 inches out of our skin. We'll just put some tussin on it and wrap it up. We can be sick as a dog, and we're gonna lie to the women that we love and tell them, I'm just a little bit down there, I'll be better tomorrow, just cook me some soup. How do we reach grown men sitting in your, and the other thing is, Black folks have been given this misnomer that we such carriers of pain, whether it's emotional, physical, psychological, that we can just handle anything. People sitting there sick, double pneumonia, and still would not get up and go until they literally were gasping for breath. What is our message to the brothers in the pews? That they have to be responsible for their health, and the women who love us have to help us to be more responsible about getting vaccinated, as well as making sure that we are healthy as can be.
Derek, you hit it dead on the head, and I'm guilty. I am guilty of enduring sometime pain that I should not endure, and not going to the doctor in a timely manner until it is absolutely necessary to go. And I don't know exactly why we do that, but we do. And so I think that we have to try to lead by example, and particularly when it comes to this vaccination. So while we post a lot of things on Facebook and Instagram, I decided to, videotape or film my getting my vaccination, and I posted it on my Vanishing Black Atlanta page, Instagram, and it was very interesting because many of the questions that I got were very sincere. Did it hurt? How do you feel? Did it make you sick? You know, and I said, well, I felt a little lethargic. And I just kind of slowed down that day. I didn't want to create any fear, to prevent somebody who really wants to go. I think fear, we cannot overlook this impact of fear, particularly for men. All right. No matter how masculine one might be, there is this innate fear sometimes as it relates to good health, Derek. And you're a part of some wonderful groups that cater, the Black Male Lab, among other groups that you are integral part of. And I think we have to start very early with our young men, and helping them to see that it is okay to get checked out, that it is okay to have some fear as it relates to medicine, but please be informed. And so in my conversation with some of the brothers at the church, and most of them, said, Pastor, look, I'm gonna take this vaccination, because I want to live. I want to live. And that's what many of them said to me. And I said, I'm so glad you want to live, because I want you to live, and I want to live. And if it means, if it means that I have to take this shot, then I'm going to do it. The other piece, there's a lot of mistrust. Social media has some very good points, but it's also gloom and doom. People depend, as you know very well, on social media for the news. Okay, they depend on it for facts, and so unfortunately, it has interfered, I think, with a number of people who might have been candidates to go. But you all put up a slide just a moment ago that I thought was really point on, in terms of conversation, and how to approach, and helping people to understand. How do we do it with our brothers? One by one. Okay, one by one. Brother, have you been vaccinated? Come on, man. Why? No, I heard. Listen, 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 listen. Do you want to live? I mean, so just common sense kind of things, I think, will help to quell some of the fear, and using some of your own tactics. Let's gather the brothers up. Let's create a support group, and let's help get our brothers and sisters, but especially our brothers, to a place where they can get vaccinated, so that they can live.
So, Mr. Bozeman, if I could jump in really quickly there, to put an exclamation point on that. Thank you for that, Dr. Mason. We have a COVID Convo Challenge, where we are encouraging the vaccinated to learn all of the facts that kind of help to combat this misinformation and these fears. And we are encouraging people to have at least 3 conversations a day about getting vaccinated to people who are unvaccinated. And if you need that information, aliveandincolor.com has all of the resources you might need. If you register to become an advocate, you can have conversation guides on all of those topics. And you could then train other people right? And so that other people can have one-on-one conversations, because everything that we're learning, and we're out there talking to people, is that people are deciding to get vaccinated after multiple one-on-one conversations.
Mhm.
And the most influential people to have those conversations consistently are friends and family, personal doctor, and then your faith leader or your minister or your pastor. So those are the people in the community that we absolutely need to mobilize and deputize to spread this word.
Dr. Earls, the message has gotten to some of the community, because there is a large, for both you and Gail, there is a large COVID-19 equity gap. Let's talk about that for a few moments. Biracial identification. African Americans are lagging. I think we talked about some of the reasons why: mistrust. And I think Skip just brought in perhaps the biggest one, misinformation. I mean, the misinformation and disinformation campaign has been relentless. I'll be honest with you, they have done a better job than the information campaigns have. Talk about this racial gap, because clearly now, if there was those who believe that this is a plan on the government to kill us all off, our white brothers and sisters are signing up for the plan at a much faster rate than we are. What do you think is the drivers to that phenomenon that we see? The higher vaccination rate here in Fulton County, I think Gail may have mentioned it's 100,000 person gap between African American and the other communities.
Yeah, that in fact is spot on. There is as you mentioned before, a sincere mistrust within our community towards many things that occur within the medical field, and research being that one. Ms. Brooks had alluded to before some of the policies that have been put in place to put a stopgap on something like the Tuskegee experiment occurring again. And many of us are unaware of those policies, but they go as far back as, say, for example, 1974, the National Research Act, which was put in place by Nixon, which essentially went to establish some ethical principles for all patients that became in part of research. And this goes on and on. There are other acts, the Belmont Act and the HIPAA Act, which simply provides a sense of privacy for all an individual's medical records. So if you go to one health provider to another, or you go to one type of insurance to another, your medical records remain private. And you can see many of the other things that have been put in place since the Tuskegee experiment. And also, well, the first one was actually not just due to the Tuskegee experiment, but to what happened to the prisoners in the Nazi camps in World War II. But a lot of us are unaware of these policies, right? And that's one thing. But one thing we are aware of, and one thing that we can see with our eyes, is as you mentioned, the disparity between who got the vaccine and who didn't. We didn't see that in the Tuskegee experiment. There were no Caucasian folks in the Tuskegee experiment, even pretending as if they were getting free medical care. They were not there. But what we do see is at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where I volunteered to vaccinate, what we saw was our Caucasian neighbors, many of them coming from distant neighborhoods, to rush to register, and then to rush to sign up, and then to rush to get into line in the rain or whatever the weather may be, to come in and get the vaccination. We saw that. So this situation is grossly different than that took place in the Tuskegee experiment. And I don't want to minimize our fear of what occurred in that space. I definitely don't want to do that. However, this is different. And the majority of folks who are dying from this, percentage-wise, is us. We only make up 12% of the United States, but yet we make up over 40% of all the deaths that have been attributed to COVID-19. the situation between this and Tuskegee is just different.
When you look at the sheer numbers, it's staggering. 700,000 in the United States dead. I don't know what the latest number is because we stopped tracking it. That's a lot of lost lives. That's a lot of funeral. That's a lot of people who've been left in misery. I'm just still perplexed at what is it going to take. What I'm really curious to understand from our white brothers and sisters what drove them, and perhaps it ain't been the fear of all these other issues that we've had. And so, looking at the sheer volume of death, another thing, Doc, on this call today, we didn't know this because we did not ask, right? We have not asked everybody. There are 3 of us and perhaps a 4th one who have been exposed, 3 for sure, and 1 possible. And there's only 6 or 7 of us on this call. What does that say to you as one who look at this, trend? And there's no connective to us other than, we're not in the same family, although we are. Me and Skip are alphas. I think we may have been in the same place 1 or 2 times. What does that say in terms of the numbers and what foretells the future for our people if we don't get vaccinated?
Thank you, Brother Bozeman. I think it would lead us to believe that unless we make a very quick detour in terms of the way we're taking care of each other, we're not going to do well, right? And we need to make that change now. And it is indeed possible. You asked before, what in fact will it take? I think it will take more opportunities to do these kinds of things. Or depending upon who the audience is, my friend, Brother Jamal there says it's one-on-one with younger people, but to figure out what it would take to reach each segment of our community, it's about as emergent as it can possibly get. You mentioned that we need to come out or I think Brother Mason mentioned that we need to come out like we came out in the 2020 election. I would suggest that we need to come out more than that, because the 2020 election was a slim margin. I mean, we won clearly, contrary to some other thoughts, but that was too slim of a margin right there. We need a larger margin here. We are indeed behind. So I think it's going to take us all coming together and reaching out like we're doing right now. All of us, not just the ones here on this panel, but your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, your mama, everybody who can.
We've been kind of going around and talk, but anybody just dive in, and just take the question. As I said, 4 of us on this call have been impacted by it, but for the grace of God, the story could have been different. And so to hear Jamal say he spent 5 days, to me, that's very compelling. If you look at the brother, he's sharp, he's tight, he's together. But that made me pause and say, dang. I mean, I won't put nothing extra on Jamal, but this brother could have not been on this panel. It could have been another Jamal on here. So from that standpoint, Jamal, just talk about your own experience, because I do believe as we are winding up this session, there is power in the story. And we kind of glazed over it now that we got a few extra minutes before we let you all make your closing arguments. Because we're going to treat this like a courtroom. Get ready for your 2-minute or so closing argument to the people. But Jamal, was there any time during that period, and for Jamal and Gail, who were both sick from this virus, was there any time that you had any doubt that you might not make it, or you were concerned that this could, as we say, as Skip and them saying at the church, this could be the last time?
This could
What was
be.
the worst of it like?
So what I would say is this, and I always give my grandmother and my mother, I call them my grace and my mercy, because they taught me how to pray. And so I never thought I was leaving this planet because I just didn't feel like it was my time, because I truly believe I have too much work to do. There's just too much work to do. So, but I will tell you this. I told a good friend of mine and spoke with him this week. I said it was the worst week of my entire life, and I pledged 5 months. It was the absolute worst week of my life. And as I've processed your questions and how you facilitate, you've done an amazing job. I've just been processing the what can we do? And there's a few things I think that we can do. This is one. I think that we can target our barber and beauty shops. I think that we need to establish some dialogue with them where we can come in on a Saturday and have some 30-minute sessions with their groups of people that come in and out. I think that we should get our young people on the campuses and support them in having forums, allow them to actually lead the forum, and we just support the forum, be it financially, be it the food, whatever way we need to do it. That's the thing that we need to do. I think that we should also make sure we touch all of our faith-based institutions and get the leaders of those institutions on board so that we can have a dialogue with them. Brother Mason spoke, and I applaud him for having 98% of his congregation vaccinated. I think that's critical, and that's an applause to you. Job well done. But how many other ministries can make that claim? I think that we need to do everything that we can, everything that's in our power. I think that we need to touch all of the affinity groups that we are a member of, because most of us are probably members of more than 1, 2, or 3 of these affinity groups. And then at the end of the day, I think we just need to continuously sing the song of success. And you spoke to this when you said there is misinformation, and there's a lot of misinformation. I was forwarded some information this morning, which made me laugh. But I think that we need to be telling the story louder and larger and in more venues than everyone else. And every time we do anything that's a social outing, be it a picnic, be it a family reunion, be it a class reunion, be it a fraternity or sorority reunion, we need to have COVID as a part of the presentation. It should be, if it's nothing but 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it needs to be on the agenda. And if we could keep that on the agenda, we can establish, or we can close that 90,000 gap and make it better for not just our families, but for all the people that look like us.
If I could jump in too, Derek, I think that we just need to continue to do what we're doing. You're doing a marvelous job on your show, pushing, providing, informing, bringing people, engaging them, in the conversation as well. And kudos to all of these fellow panelists. But we just need to continue to push, homecoming season. I think this will be the first year that there'll be actual face-to-face homecoming, hopefully. And I know we have Howard represented. That's a fine school. I know we have Dillard represented. It's a great school. But Derek and I graduates of Morris Brown College, and we have an epic homecoming. Don't sleep on Morris Brown, okay? But I hope that the leadership and others will say, look, come to homecoming, but you come vaccinated, come protecting the family, that you love. And those kinds of things, that we encourage our people to do. And I hope opportunities will be used at homecoming. I think, Jamal, you hit it dead on the head. We have to use every opportunity that we can to provide some information, some knowledge of it, and to overcome lack of information. I won't say ignorance, although And there's some good folks putting comments in the chat. I see some wonderful friends of mine, Connie Smith Lindsay. We were in school together. Connie was at Spelman. I was at Morris Brown. We took communication course. George Lester, one of my very dear friends. But Mr. D. Gordon Drabes put a comment in. And I met him some years ago when I did the East Point Black History book. He said there was a Black guy on the MARTA bus insisting that air pollution and the atomic bomb had created COVID. Now, we know that is very far-fetched, but it is those types of statements and rumors that perpetuate and fuel that, that this COVID was created and it was intended to destroy Black people. And that's what we have to work to do, particularly with people of color, to help them not to feed into some of these far-fetched theories, and just use very common sense methods to do that. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with this group, and hopefully, this will get some good circulation. And if we get one or two out of the viewers to say, I'm going to go ahead and get my vaccination, it has been well worth our time.
We got 1 or 2 minutes. Let's go back, Gail. Gail, I want to make sure as we get ready for our closing arguments from all of these thought leaders, let me first of all say what an honor it is for me to moderate this conversation. It's very important. And as I'm sitting here thinking, maybe we need to get some t-shirts made up that we can all wear that says I'm vaccinated because I care about me, I care about my community, and I care about you. So y'all work on that for me, okay? And so that I can wear it daily. So I think that's one way we can let people know. I'm not only concerned about myself, I'm concerned about the community, and I'm concerned about you as well. And so, Gail, anything by way of just information that we need to hit before we give each one of these leaders in their respective areas a minute, 30 seconds, about 2-minute closing argument. And I want you to think about what you would say as you go back to your groups, your church, back to your association, even back to the school, back to the doctors of the profession. Dr. Earls, what message do we need to drive home very clearly to them? But Gail, our co-moderator, thank you so much for joining us. I insisted that Gail be here with us because she has looked at this thing from every way you can, scientifically, from the numbers, from the understanding this virus, and she do it for perhaps selfish reasons, having lived through it and still dealing with it makes you understand the importance of prevention. And always we err on the side of prevention because I would not want to wish this on anybody. Gail, anything for your 2-minute closing argument?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the mic. Couple things I just wanted to let people know, particularly people who are affiliated with organizations. So number one, please register to become an advocate at Alive and in Color, because that opens the door to a whole nother bevy of resources. We create conversation guides, social media assets. We let you know of events. We have a newsletter. So it's a great way to just stay connected to what's happening here locally as it relates to COVID-19 and to get connected to tools and resources. We want to encourage people to have those conversations that we talked about. And there are a couple different ways you can do that. You can host a virtual town hall, or you can just host something smaller. Remember all those Zoom happy hours that were happening at the beginning of the pandemic when people were on lockdown? So do a pop-up Zoom happy hour and say, surprise, let me tell you a couple things. So there's all kinds of ways that we can get people into conversation. I know a lot of people have family dinners over Zoom now as a result of that. Also, if you have organizations that you'd like to partner with and you think you can get at least 50 people there, you can partner with Fulton County to actually host a vaccination event. So they have mobile clinics that they can bring to various sites in the community. And that's super important because we know there are areas that don't have a CVS on every corner, or don't have a Publix or a place where they can actually go in and just get vaccinated like that. So you can, create those opportunities, particularly for maybe workers who don't get paid time off to go get vaccinated, but who will get vaccinated if it's right outside. And then finally, I just do want to reiterate the importance of protecting ourselves, even if we are or especially if we are unvaccinated and if we are vaccinated. So if you are in gatherings with people who are outside of your household and in close proximity, get tested. There's a strong chance that you could have been exposed to COVID-19. So we've got to ramp up testing again. And then the 3 W's, wear a mask, right? And actually the word that we're hearing scientifically is N95, KN95 is the best as it relates to the Delta variant. Wash your hands. We need to be doing that anyway. But really wash your hands, walk with sanitizer, and then watch your distance. We need to still be socially distancing, particularly when we're indoors, so 6 feet apart if you're outside of your household. Thank you for the mic.
All right. Erica Broadwater from the Westview Community Organization, your 2-minute closing argument.
Yes, thank you, Derek. What I would like to say is, I understand your concerns. I understand you have questions. I was you. Get as much knowledge as you can. Talk to family members, friends, people you know who have been vaccinated. Get the information. Again, we are all connected, whether it's directly or indirectly. So we have to take care of each other. This is how we do that. If we want to get out of this, we have to pull together. We have to be responsible, get the vaccine, encourage others to get the vaccine. Take a buddy. You know how you invite someone to church? Invite someone to go take the vaccine. Let's do it together. Okay? You are going to be fine. I'm fine. My 12-year-old daughter is fine. Take the vaccine. Let's pull together and get this done. We can do it. Thank you so much.
All right, Brother Jamal Grooms from the Greater Atlanta chapter of the Panhellenic Council, your 2-minute closing argument to your constituents and friends.
Drive awareness. Ensure that if people are not aware where they can get the vaccination, you help them with access. And then have the hard conversation. Originally, I was saying to people, listen, this is an individual decision. There's one solution called the vaccine, and there's one problem called the virus. If you want to solve the problem, get the vaccine. Get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine, and wear your mask and wash your hands. God bless you.
Brother Herman Skip Mason, Reverend Doctor.
Yes, sir, Dr. Bozeman.
All the time, what is your closing message from the pulpit to the pew and to the 4 walls of this community?
So I would say in Philippians 2:5-7, God commands us in our relationship with one another to have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, by taking the very nature of a servant and not looking to our own interests, but to the interests of others. So we need to make wise decisions for ourselves. We need to recognize that our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. We need to recognize that we were created to be in community with others, loving and serving them as Christ. And we need to recognize that God wants us to live and to thrive. And God has created medicine for our bodies. You know, when we get sick, when we get a headache, we take a Tylenol, we take this. And so we have to learn how to trust God and trust the science as well. You know, and I would say that is my message, and that preachers and pastors will continue to preach by example and demonstrate the love, to console the fear, and to embrace all. But we need to get vaccinated. And I therefore beseech you, brothers and sisters, to go out and to get vaccinated so that we can live our best life and the life that Christ has called us to live.
Dr. Kathy Earls, we leave it to you as a healthcare practitioner, as a physician, as one who loves our community and our people. Tie a bow around this conversation today and drive it home for us. What do we need to be doing? What is your message to all of us.
Yeah, Brother Bozeman, I'd say that to me, it's beyond being a physician, right? Because a physician is what I do. It's not, but it's not necessarily who I am. I think the scripture that Brother Mason mentioned had in there about in the interest of others, in the interest of others. So this issue here that we have, this COVID-19, it's beyond just the individual. It's as a community, we have to deal with it. And that's the only way that we can get above that. And when we look back in history, when we look back, for example, in the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, we were able to achieve and make some gains because we came together as a community. Right? We came together as a community and marched and picketed, and therefore we can now sit up in the front part of the bus. So we do it for each other, and we do it because the thought of transmitting this virus, for me, if I was unvaccinated, to an infant who does not have the ability to vaccinate themselves, or to the little child who's about to go to kindergarten, first grade, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth grade, because they are too young to get vaccinated. We have an obligation to them to keep them safe. We also have an obligation to those individuals who could not take the vaccine for some underlying disorder, some neurological disorder, Guillain-Barré, whatever the case may be, some autoimmune disorder. We have an obligation to take care of each other. That's how things have been achieved in the past. We won 2020 because we made a decision and came together. We can do the same now.
Brothers and sisters, that's going to bring us to the close of this wonderful, as we said when we started this fireside chat, I hope that it has been informative. I pray that you will walk away better informed, or looking at the possibility of what it means that we can reach this beloved community, that perhaps that we can achieve this herd immunity. I look forward to the day where there won't be any more funerals because of COVID-19. I look forward to the day where we can say we have a 98% vaccination rate like Skip Mason Church has. I look forward to the day when I can travel freely without fear of what I might take or what I might bring back home. As I said, I'm vaccinated because I love me first. I love our community. I love our people. And I even love you. And I don't want to be a shedder or a carrier of this virus. We have a personal responsibility that we have to take with this virus. And I look forward to future conversations. Let me thank all of those who had any part in this. On behalf of, again, Alive and in Color, the Black Cross, Morehouse School of Medicine, all of the participants, Fulton County, thank you for allowing us this time to be together, for us to share in this moment, in this time, in this information. I pray that you and your family are well, and that nobody gets this dreaded virus. Nobody gets the virus because they were unvaccinated. And so if we have pushed the needle at all to help one person get off the fence and make a decision, it has been, the last hour and 30 minutes have been well worth it and well spent. And on that note, good evening, everybody, and we'll see you for the next conversation. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your night.